Hello everyone. Today here we gather to explore something profoundly relevant to the philosophy of Stoicism, how external circumstances, particularly in childhood, can influence the mind, body, and our response to the world. As Stoics, we believe in focusing on what we can control while accepting what we cannot. But what happens when life begins in chaos, trauma, or adversity? Can the teachings of Stoicism help us understand and perhaps overcome the effects of toxic childhood stress? Let's first reflect on the Stoic idea that external events are indifferent. They are neither inherently good nor bad, but our response to them defines our experience. Seneca, Epictetus, and Marcus Aurelius taught us to master our minds and emotions despite circumstances, but modern science shows us that for children, their environment shapes not only their thoughts but their physical being as well. Today, we will explore the Stoic approach to overcoming adversity in light of new scientific understandings of toxic stress and trauma. Point 1. Understanding toxic stress in a Stoic context. In Stoicism, we often talk about fortifying the mind, becoming resilient in the face of adversity. But what does this look like for a child who is still developing physically and emotionally? Stoics teach that external events should not disturb our inner peace, but for a young mind and body, prolonged exposure to negative environments, whether it's neglect, abuse, or exposure to violence, leaves more than just mental scars. These environments create a situation called toxic stress. Toxic stress, unlike short bursts of manageable stress, is constant and overwhelming. It can disrupt a child's ability to cultivate inner calm, often leading them into adulthood with a foundation of fear, anxiety, and physical ailments. Imagine the child who grows up in fear without a sense of stability. How can they practice Stoic tranquility when their body and mind are in a perpetual state of alarm? This constant state of stress affects their heart, their immune system, their ability to reason clearly, all of which makes it harder for them to develop the rational, composed mindset that Stoicism advocates. However, Stoicism is not about ignoring the pain and struggles of life, but about facing them head-on. Toxic stress is a call for early intervention, for building resilience in children through supportive relationships. If we draw on Stoic teachings, we realize that toxic stress calls for cultivating virtues like courage, wisdom, and justice, not only in the child, but in the society that surrounds them. It's a collective responsibility. Point 2. The science behind trauma and brain development. Stoicism teaches us that adversity is inevitable, but how we deal with it is entirely in our control. However, science shows that toxic stress can physically alter a child's brain, affecting their ability to exercise the very Stoic principles that are so critical to living well. The Stoics might have been surprised to learn how much the brain, particularly in childhood, is vulnerable to external influences like stress. When children are exposed to prolonged adversity, their brains are flooded with stress hormones, particularly cortisol. In a Stoic world, the mind and body are tools that should be sharpened, disciplined, and under our control. But toxic stress reshapes the brain in ways that make this discipline much harder. The amygdala, which governs our fear response, becomes overactive. This leads to heightened anxiety and difficulty in calming the mind. A key Stoic principle, the prefrontal cortex, which we rely on for rational decision-making, weakens under toxic stress. Imagine how much more challenging it becomes to follow the Stoic maxim of thinking clearly and rationally when the brain itself is impaired. Epictetus said, "It's not what happens to you, but how you react to it that matters." And while this is a powerful guiding principle, we must also acknowledge that trauma, particularly in childhood, fundamentally affects our ability to react. Children who grow up in trauma-filled environments often lose touch with their capacity for reason, leading to impulsive behaviors, emotional instability, and struggles with focus. In a very real way, their ability to practice Stoic control over their emotions has been compromised. But this is not the end of the story. As Stoics, we believe in neuroplasticity, the mind's ability to reshape and heal. Though childhood adversity disrupts normal development, The Stoic principles of self-mastery, rational thought, and self-reflection can still be taught and nurtured in these individuals, provided they receive the right interventions. The Stoic approach demands that we work with what we have, recognizing our strengths and limitations, while striving for improvement. Point 3. The Stoic Path to Overcoming Toxic Stress. The Stoics recognize that suffering is inevitable, but how we respond is always within our control. Toxic childhood stress represents one of the most challenging forms of adversity because it affects us during our most vulnerable years. But it's important to remember that Stoicism is not about avoiding hardship. It's about building resilience in the face of it. If a child experiences toxic stress, their path toward Stoic mastery may be steeper, but it is not insurmountable. With the right support, education, and intervention, children who have experienced trauma can learn to regulate their emotions, strengthen their reasoning, and eventually find the peace within themselves that Stoicism promises. In the words of Marcus Aurelius, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." This wisdom holds true even for those who have faced the deepest challenges in their formative years. By understanding the science behind toxic stress and offering compassionate support, we can help children and adults alike find their way back to the Stoic path of inner peace, self-mastery, and resilience. We began with the Stoic concept that, while external events are beyond our control, how we choose to respond to them determines our peace and well-being. Now we're building on this foundation to explore the long-term consequences of toxic childhood stress. Specifically, we'll discuss how childhood trauma can ripple into adulthood, affecting not only mental health, but also physical health. And finally, we will turn to the critical question: how do we recognize and address toxic stress before it becomes a lifelong burden? The Stoic Path teaches us that even in the face of overwhelming challenges, we can build resilience and thrive. Let's now apply that wisdom to how we handle the lasting impact of toxic stress. Point 4. Linking childhood trauma to adult health in the light of Stoicism. Stoicism has always emphasized the interconnectedness of body and mind. The Stoics believed that living in harmony with nature meant not just emotional peace, but also physical well-being. Marcus Aurelius often wrote about the fleeting nature of life and the body's fragility. While these reflections help us accept life's impermanence, modern science shows us something alarming. Childhood trauma doesn't just affect the mind, it weakens the body in profound ways, impacting our longevity. When a child is exposed to toxic stress, as we discussed earlier, their body remains in a constant state of fight or flight. This may serve an immediate purpose in keeping them alert to threats, but over time, it damages their body's systems. The research on adverse childhood experiences shows a direct link between childhood trauma and adult health problems, such as heart disease, diabetes, and even cancer. How does this connect with Stoic philosophy? Epictetus taught that we should care for our body as we do our mind. However, for those who grow up in environments of toxic stress, the body is often neglected or damaged before they even have the chance to take charge of their well-being. Constant exposure to stress hormones like cortisol eats away at the body's defenses, causing inflammation and leading to chronic diseases. Here is where Stoicism's focus on the present moment becomes powerful. Despite the harm done by early adversity, the Stoic belief in focusing on what can be changed offers a solution. The past, those childhood traumas, is out of our control. But the present offers us the opportunity to care for ourselves, to make changes in how we treat our bodies, and to strengthen our minds despite what we have endured. The Stoic philosopher Seneca often reflected on how adversity can become an ally if we learn from it. Similarly, modern science tells us that while childhood trauma can negatively impact adult health, early intervention and conscious care can mitigate these effects. The body can heal just as the mind can. But this healing requires awareness, and that's why identifying toxic stress is so essential. Point 5. Identifying and addressing toxic stress through a Stoic lens. Let's now turn to the process of identifying toxic stress, particularly in children, and what we can do about it. As Stoics, we understand the importance of early intervention, not just when facing personal challenges, but when we notice suffering in others, particularly children. The Stoic concept of sympathia, or the interconnectedness of all humanity, compels us to take action when we witness distress, especially in those who cannot yet advocate for themselves. Children experiencing toxic stress may not always be able to articulate their feelings, but their behavior often tells the story. Irritability, withdrawal, difficulty concentrating. These are all signals that a child is struggling. As Stoics, it is our duty to observe these signs with care and compassion, and act in ways that help them build resilience. We must act, as Marcus Aurelius said, to be good to others and help them fulfill their potential. In identifying toxic stress, we must be like the physician, diagnosing not only the physical symptoms, but also the underlying causes. This means looking beyond the surface of a child's behavior and asking deeper questions. What is the child's environment like? Are they receiving support from caregivers? Are they subjected to violence, neglect, or chaos? Once identified, the Stoic approach to addressing toxic stress mirrors what modern research suggests. Healing begins with support. A child cannot become resilient alone. They need the care of adults, whether it's family, teachers, or mentors, who can model the virtues of Stoicism. In a world full of turmoil, we can be the calm, steady presence that these children need. We can teach them the Stoic principles of self-control, emotional regulation, and the wisdom to differentiate between what they can control and what they cannot. Schools and healthcare providers also play a crucial role. Stoicism teaches us the value of community, and today's understanding of trauma supports this. By creating trauma-sensitive environments, whether in classrooms or healthcare settings, we can prevent further harm and help children begin their journey to healing. The Stoic virtue of courage becomes especially important here. It takes courage to face the reality of toxic stress, just as it takes courage to work toward healing from it. For the child, it takes courage to express their emotions and to begin to trust again. For adults, it takes courage to intervene, to guide, and to provide consistent, nurturing support. Point 6. The Stoic Path to Healing and Growth. The Stoic Path teaches us that adversity, when confronted with courage and wisdom, can be transformed into an opportunity for growth. Toxic childhood stress is a profound adversity, one that shapes not only the mind but the body. But Stoicism, alongside modern science, shows us that this adversity does not define the future. We have the power to recognize and address toxic stress, not just for ourselves but for those around us, especially the most vulnerable. As we cultivate virtues like wisdom, courage, justice, and self-control, we become instruments of healing, not only for ourselves, but for the children and adults whose lives have been shaped by early adversity. Seneca once said, "Difficulties strengthen the mind, as labor does the body." The difficulties brought on by toxic stress are real, but they are not insurmountable. Through compassion, care, and the Stoic principles of resilience and mindfulness, we can help others and ourselves heal and grow stronger. So as of now, we've explored the deep, often hidden impact that early adversity can have on both the mind and body, as well as the ways in which we can recognize and address toxic stress to foster healing. Today, we move into the broader implications, how trauma can perpetuate itself across generations, and perhaps most critically, how we can build a resilient future by breaking this cycle. As Stoics, we understand that the effects of our actions ripple beyond ourselves. What we do today, whether we allow toxic stress to fester or actively work to address it, will shape not only our lives, but also the lives of future generations. Now let's apply Stoic wisdom to the question of how we can break the cycle of trauma and create a world in which children are nurtured to develop strength and resilience. Point 7. Breaking the cycle of trauma across generations. One of the most challenging aspects of toxic stress is its tendency to pass from generation to generation. We know that children who grow up in environments of instability, neglect, or violence are more likely to struggle as adults. These struggles often manifest as mental health issues, substance abuse, and even difficulty forming stable relationships. In turn, they may unintentionally recreate these stressful environments for their own children. The Stoic philosopher Seneca reminds us that we suffer more often in imagination than in reality. While this speaks to the importance of mastering our perceptions, it also highlights a core issue with generational trauma. Children growing up in toxic environments internalize these external stresses as part of their identity. They carry these patterns of fear, anxiety, and emotional dysregulation into adulthood. Without intervention, these burdens are passed on to their children, continuing the cycle. But Stoicism also teaches us that the past need not dictate the future. Marcus Aurelius frequently wrote about the power of the present moment and the importance of making decisions based on what is right, rather than what is easy. For individuals who have experienced toxic stress, this wisdom is crucial. Though their childhood may have been marked by chaos, they can still choose to break the cycle. This choice requires reflection, courage, and most importantly, support. The Stoic practice of self-examination, the nightly reflection Marcus Aurelius and Epictetus advocated, is a valuable tool in this process. By encouraging individuals to examine their behaviors, emotions, and thoughts each day, we can help them become more conscious of the ways in which they may be perpetuating toxic patterns. But reflection alone isn't enough. As Stoics, we must also act. We must advocate for trauma-informed therapies that help individuals process and heal from their experiences, giving them the tools they need to parent and live differently. Breaking the cycle of trauma isn't just an individual effort. As a community, we have a responsibility to intervene when we see toxic stress affecting others. By fostering supportive, nurturing environments, whether in schools, families, or workplaces, we can prevent the transmission of toxic stress to the next generation. Stoicism teaches us that we are all part of a larger whole, a concept known as sympatheia. Therefore, breaking the cycle of trauma is not just an individual pursuit, but a communal obligation. Point 8. Building a resilient future through Stoic principles. So, how do we take what we've learned and build a resilient future? How do we apply the teachings of Stoicism to ensure that children, even those who have experienced toxic stress, can grow into healthy, strong adults? This is where Stoic philosophy and modern psychology converge beautifully. First, we need to focus on the Stoic principle of preparation, the idea that we should be ready to face adversity before it arrives. In the context of toxic stress, this means building systems and structures that help children and families before toxic stress becomes unmanageable. Schools, for example, can become places where resilience is taught and cultivated. By incorporating social-emotional learning and trauma-sensitive practices, educators can help children learn the Stoic skills of emotional regulation, self-control, and rational thinking. Resilience, in Stoic terms, is not about avoiding hardship but about confronting and learning from it. As Marcus Aurelius wrote, "The impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way." Toxic stress, though harmful, can also be an opportunity for growth if the right support is in place. Resilience is built not through the absence of adversity, but through the presence of consistent, supportive relationships. We, as Stoics, must be that presence for those around us, especially for the most vulnerable. Next, we must teach the importance of perspective. One of the core tenets of Stoicism is the idea that we control how we interpret events. While toxic stress is undeniably harmful, teaching children and adults how to reframe their experiences can make a world of difference. Instead of seeing themselves as victims of their circumstances, they can learn to see themselves as active participants in their healing journey. This shift in perspective is empowering and aligns perfectly with the Stoic idea that we always have a choice in how we respond to life's challenges. Finally, we need to foster a sense of community. Stoicism emphasizes the importance of sympatheia, the idea that we are all connected and that our well-being is tied to the well-being of others. To build a resilient future, we must create communities that support healing. This means advocating for policies that provide mental health support, ensure access to education, and create safe, stable environments for children to grow up in. It also means fostering relationships where empathy, patience, and understanding are central. By applying these Stoic principles, preparation, perspective, and community, we can begin to build a future in which children, no matter their background, are given the tools they need to thrive. Point 9. Shaping the future through Stoic wisdom. Let's reflect on the wisdom of Stoicism and how it can guide us in addressing the profound challenges of toxic childhood stress. Trauma may ripple across generations, but Stoicism teaches us that each of us has the power to break that cycle. By applying principles of reflection, resilience, and community, we can create a future in which toxic stress no longer defines the lives of children or the adults they become. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "Do not act as if you had 10,000 years to live. Your fate is hanging over you. While you live, while it is in your power, be good." Today, we are called to act. Not tomorrow, not in some distant future, but now. It is within our power to break the cycle of trauma and to build a resilient future for ourselves, our children, and generations to come. As we conclude today's discussion, I want to take a moment to reflect on the journey we've undertaken together. Through the lens of Stoicism, we've explored the complex issue of toxic childhood stress, how it affects both the mind and body, how it can shape adult health, how it has the power to perpetuate itself across generations, and most importantly, how we can break that cycle to build a resilient future. The Stoic philosophers, Marcus Aurelius, Seneca, Epictetus, taught us that while we cannot control the external events that life throws our way, we always have the power to shape our responses. This truth is especially important when we confront the reality of toxic stress. The adversities that children face in their most formative years can have a lasting impact, but as Stoics, we recognize that it is never too late to change, to grow, and to heal. We've discussed how toxic stress can alter the brain, making it harder for children to cultivate the Stoic virtues of reason, self-control, and tranquility. Yet we also know that with the right support and intervention, healing is possible. As adults, we have a responsibility, not just to ourselves, but to the children in our lives and communities, to model resilience, compassion, and wisdom. By identifying toxic stress early and responding with care, we can help those affected by trauma build the inner strength they need to thrive. The cycle of trauma across generations presents one of the greatest challenges to our collective well-being. But as Stoics, we do not shy away from challenges. We understand that adversity, when met with courage and wisdom, can become the very source of our growth. Breaking the cycle of toxic stress is not just about healing the past. It's about creating a future where all children have the opportunity to live in alignment with their highest potential. Finally, let us remember the power of community. Stoicism teaches us that we are all connected, that our individual well-being is intertwined with the well-being of others. As we move forward, let us commit ourselves to building a world where every child is supported, where resilience is taught, and where adversity is met with strength and compassion. In doing so, we honor the Stoic tradition, and we lay the foundation for a brighter, more resilient future for all. Thank you for your attention and commitment to this important issue. Together, we can make a difference. Thank you.